Have you ever been stuck, like really stuck, wondering if you should just keep pushing for something or, I don't know, just let it go?
Oh, absolutely. Happens all the time, right?
Heck,
Career stuff, personal projects.
totally. Or even, a relationship sometimes.
Yeah,
It's a tough spot.
it really is. It's such a universal feeling, that uncertainty. We hear so much about, like, never give up and grit.
Right, perseverance.
Yeah, and that's super important, definitely. But knowing when to maybe change course, that can be just as vital for your own happiness and, honestly, for finding something even better.
Exactly. So that's what we're getting into today, this big question. How do you actually know when to keep grinding versus when it's time to pivot?
Mm.
We've looked into some really interesting perspective stuff from Forbes, Psychology Today, even some online chats, plus expert takes on what makes us tick and when quitting is actually the smart move.
The aim is really to give you some, hopefully, clearer ways to think through these decisions, make them feel a bit less daunting.
Hopefully less daunting, yeah. So where do we start?
Well, a really fascinating place to begin is looking at why you're chasing the goal in the first place, your motivation.
Okay, the why makes
Yeah,
sense.
because there's a key idea here.
Yeah.
Goals that are, like, pushed by fear or maybe pressure from others, they actually undermine your own inner drive.
Ah, so if you're doing it because you're scared of something.
Exactly. Research actually shows it leads to effort that just doesn't last.
Yeah.
Think about doing something because you're afraid of what people might think if you don't do it.
Right, like keeping up appearances.
That kind of motivation.
Yeah.
It tends to fizzle out pretty fast, and honestly, it can just leave you feeling drained.
That completely rings true. Like, think about trying to lose weight or get fit.
Okay,
If
yeah.
you're doing it because you feel, I don't know, pressured by diet culture or worried about fitting in, it often feels like such a chore, doesn't it?
A total slog.
But if your motivation comes from, like, genuinely wanting to feel healthier or finding movement you actually enjoy.
And it feels different, more
Yeah.
sustainable.
Yeah, way more sustainable. It's about what actually helps you, not what you think you should want.
Absolutely. And one of the articles we looked at, I think it was in Forbes, really drove this home. When we chase goals mainly to, say, prove someone wrong, or maybe to silence those inner fears about not being good
Oh,
enough,
yeah, that's a big one.
it creates so much internal stress.
Yeah.
It can seriously pave the way for burnout. Imagine, like, an ambitious professional who ties their whole self-worth to hitting the next career milestone.
Uh-huh. Seen that happen.
That drive, while it looks impressive maybe, can become really unhealthy. The constant pressure just wears you down. So it's really worth asking yourself, honestly, are my reasons for doing this actually benefiting me? Or are they just adding more stress?
Okay, so checking in on the why is step one. Super important. But what if the why was solid at the start, but things change? You change.
That's such a crucial point.
Mm,
Because we do change. Our values shift, our life circumstances evolve. It's totally natural for goals to change too.
right. It's not like we're static.
Not at all. The Forbes piece had a really simple, great example for this. Think back to when you were a teenager. Maybe you had a huge crush on some celebrity.
Huh. Okay. Yeah. Embarrassingly, yes.
Right. And back then, it felt like the most important thing in the world.
Totally all-consuming.
But now,
Yeah.
probably feels pretty irrelevant, right?
Completely. Couldn't care less.
So that's a key insight. Don't feel like you have to cling on to goals that just don't fit anymore. Letting go of goals that aren't serving you isn't failing. It's actually healthy. It's adaptation.
That's a good way to put it. Adaptation.
Yeah, and there's research, I think it was in the Personality and Social Psychology Bulletin, showing that when people disengage from goals that aren't working out and redirect that energy somewhere else,
Mhm.
their psychological well-being actually improves.
It's like cleaning out your closet, right?
Mm-hmm.
Getting rid of clothes that maybe you loved once, but they just don't fit you anymore. They're just taking up space.
Perfect analogy. Exactly that. So it really pays to check in with yourself regularly, like what genuinely fulfills me now, and be willing to adjust your aims if the answer isn't what it used to be.
Okay, so the why matters, and it's okay if the why or the goal itself evolves. What else plays into this? What about just running out of steam or resources?
Ah, yes.
Yeah.
Resources. That's another huge piece of this puzzle. Hugely important.
Because you can want something badly, it can still feel right, but if you literally don't have the time or the energy or the support,
Then it becomes almost impossible.
yeah,
You're right. When we set a goal, we really need to be realistic about what we actually have available to pursue it,
both inside and out.
both inside and out. So internally, that's things like your own mental energy, your physical health, your skills. And externally, that's stuff like, do you have a support system, financial resources, just plain old time? There's research actually from the Journal of Applied Psychology that looks specifically at how being low on resources, resource depletion, impacts performance and well-being. It often focuses on work goals, but honestly, the principle applies everywhere.
Trying to do too much with too little just sets you up for failure, or at least a lot of stress.
Precisely.
It's like trying to build, I don't know, a giant sandcastle right when the tide is rushing in.
Huh. Yeah, good one.
You can be super determined, have the best plans, but if you don't have enough sand or the waves keep washing it away or you run out of daylight,
Yeah,
it's just not going to happen.
exactly. And that feeling of constant struggle, especially if you feel like you're going it alone without much support, that can lead straight to mental exhaustion, feeling like you're on a hamster wheel you can't get off.
Ugh, yeah, the
Yeah.
hamster wheel.
And I like how the Forbes article framed this being flexible enough to recognize when you're depleted isn't weakness. It's actually smart. Letting go when you're truly running on empty, when the resources just aren't there, can sometimes free you up. It can open doors to things you didn't expect.
So it's not quitting, it's a strategic retreat.
Kind of, yeah. It's about recognizing that sometimes pushing harder isn't the answer. Sometimes it's actually counterproductive.
Okay. Now, we can't really talk about sticking with difficult things without bringing up grit, can we? It's been such a buzzword.
True. Grit is definitely part of this conversation. Yeah. Angela Duckworth, the psychologist, really brought it into the spotlight
Right, she defined it as...
as perseverance and passion for long-term goals. So it's two parts, sticking with it and really caring about it over the long haul.
And her research suggested it's a really big deal for success.
Yeah, her work indicated that this ability to, keep going, stay passionate, even through setbacks over a long period, it might actually predict success better than raw talent or IQ in a lot of situations.
Like in school or getting through tough training.
Exactly. Educational goals, things like West Point training, even the National Spelling Bee.
The spelling bee, I remember that. It's kind of wild to think that just doggedly sticking with something, practicing like crazy, can matter more than just being naturally gifted.
It is pretty amazing. And grit is also closely linked to resilience. People who score higher on grit tend to bounce back faster when they face difficulties or failures.
Okay, that makes sense. But is it always clear-cut, like the passion part versus the perseverance part?
That's where it gets interesting. Some researchers debate how much the passion or consistent interest part really matters compared to just the perseverance of effort part,
Ah, so you could just be stubbornly sticking with something.
potentially.
Yeah.
Which raises that tricky question again. If the passion fades, is the grit you have left a good reason to keep pushing? Or is it maybe a sign you're just stuck in stubborn mode on something that doesn't light you up anymore?
Yeah. Good question.
And another interesting finding is that grit doesn't always correlate strongly with intelligence. Sometimes it's even slightly inversely correlated. But it is strongly linked to conscientiousness, being organized, dependable, disciplined, one of the big 5 personality traits.
So it's less about being brilliant and more about being diligent and just not giving up easily. Showing up day after day.
That seems to be a big part of it,
Yeah.
especially for those really long-term goals, like finishing your education or mastering a complex skill.
Okay, so grit is important. Perseverance matters.
Yeah.
But how do we figure out when that effort is actually productive versus when we're just, banging our head against a wall?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? When is it grit and when is it just futility?
Right.
Well, one sign people talk about is when you start feeling like you're getting less juice for the squeeze.
Less juice for the squeeze. I like that.
Yeah. It means you're putting in a ton of effort, maybe even more than before, but the results are minimal. Progress stalls.
Okay. You feel like you're working harder, but getting less done.
Exactly. Maybe you're making more mistakes, things feel frustratingly slow, conversations about it don't seem to lead anywhere productive. That feeling of spinning your wheels, that's a pretty strong signal to at least pause and reassess what's going on.
Yeah, I've definitely felt that before. Like running in thick mud. You're expending energy, but you're barely moving.
That's a great image for it. And another sign someone brought up, which is huge, especially if you're not working alone, is misalignment.
Misalignment with other people.
Yeah, with key people.
Right.
Like if what you're pouring your energy into isn't actually valued or prioritized by your team, your manager, your collaborators, whoever is important in that context.
Oh, that can be so frustrating. You feel like you're doing good work, but it's not landing right.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
There was an example shared about a professional who was really passionate about things like boosting team morale, diversity initiative, really important stuff, right?
Absolutely.
But her managers were laser focused on hitting very specific, short-term strategic targets.
Hmm.
And because her valuable efforts weren't directly aligned with those priorities,
It didn't help her.
it actually kind of held her back in terms of recognition and advancement in that specific role. She had to recognize that mismatch and figure out how to adjust her focus or find a place where her priorities were better aligned.
Wow. So alignment is key. What else?
Then there's this idea, which I love, of realizing something is not in your zone of genius.
Ooh, zone of genius. Tell me more.
It's about recognizing when you're constantly forcing yourself to do tasks that just fundamentally drain you, things that clash with your core values or aren't leveraging your natural strengths.
Like if you absolutely hate public speaking, but you're trying to build a career that requires constant presentations.
Exactly. Or maybe you're brilliant creatively, but you're forcing yourself to handle intricate financial spreadsheets day in, day out, and it just kills your soul a little bit each time.
Right. It's that feeling of constant uphill battle and tasks that just don't fit you.
Yes. And continuing to pour energy into those areas, it's often unsustainable and leads to resentment or burnout. It might be a sign that particular path or that specific way of doing things isn't right for you.
Okay, so less juice for the squeeze, misalignment, not in your zone of genius. Any other signals?
Another interesting one is thinking about regret.
Huh.
If you were to quit this thing, this goal, this project, after the initial maybe wave of guilt or fear passes, would you ultimately feel a sense of relief, a feeling of no regrets?
Looking past the immediate discomfort.
Yeah. If deep down you suspect you'd feel clearer, lighter, more at peace, knowing it was the right call, even if it's scary. That's a powerful indicator.
That makes a lot of sense. And what about that idea? I think someone mentioned life abhors a vacuum.
Oh, I love that one too. It's so often true. When you consciously decide to let go of something that's draining you or isn't working.
Space opens up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It creates room, mental space, time, energy for new things to come in, often things you couldn't have predicted. Someone shared a story about finally canceling this cohort program they ran, which was becoming a drag. And almost immediately, this amazing speaking opportunity landed in their lap. Plus, they suddenly had more quality time for family.
It's like pruning a plant, right? You cut back the dead branches so new growth can happen.
Beautifully put. It's freeing up those resources for something potentially better. And then you have voices like Joe Rogan talking about choosing your struggle.
Choosing your struggle.
Yeah, the idea that there's a certain satisfaction in tackling difficult things that you choose to take on, things you're passionate about, versus just enduring the struggles that life kind of imposes on you without your consent.
Ah, like the difference between training hard for a marathon you want to run versus just dealing with a horrible commute every day.
Exactly. And he also talks about discipline. How much easier it is to be disciplined and focused when it's driven by genuine passion for what you're doing,
Compared to trying to force yourself.
compared to forcing yourself day after day to be disciplined about something you secretly kind of hate or just don't care about anymore. That forced discipline is exhausting.
Yeah, that feels like pushing a rock uphill constantly. Okay, this is all really helpful in identifying signs, but there's this other mental trap, right? The sunk cost thing.
Ah, yes. The sunk cost fallacy. That is a big one. It trips up so many people and businesses too.
It feels so logical, but it's not. Explain it again.
Okay, so the sunk cost fallacy is basically our tendency to keep pouring resources, time, money, effort into something just because we've already invested so much in the past.
Even if it's clearly not working now.
Even if all current evidence suggests it's a bad idea to continue, and the future costs or efforts are likely to outweigh any potential future benefits, we stick with it because we don't want those past investments to feel wasted.
Like sitting through a truly terrible movie you paid $15 for just because you already paid the money.
Exactly. Instead of cutting your losses and leaving to do something enjoyable, you endure 2 hours of boredom because you can't let go of the $15 you already spent.
Or sticking with a failing business project way too long because you've already sunk thousands of dollars and countless hours into it.
Precisely. It's driven by that feeling of, I've come too far to turn back now, even if turning back is the most rational choice based on the current situation and future prospects.
So why do we do that? It sounds irrational when you put it like that.
Well, there are a few psychological factors at play. One is loss aversion. We tend to feel the pain of a loss much more intensely than the pleasure of an equivalent gain. So admitting the past investment is lost feels really bad, and we try to avoid that feeling.
Okay, we hate losing.
We really do. Then there's the framing effect. We want to be able to frame the whole endeavor as a success, or at least not a failure. Continuing seems like it keeps the possibility of success alive, even if it's unrealistic.
We want to save face, maybe. Or stick to the original narrative.
Yeah, and feeling personally responsible for the initial decision to invest makes it harder to pull the plug. Plus, there's often a desire not to appear wasteful to ourselves or others.
Wow. Okay, that explains a lot. So how do we fight against this? How do we avoid falling into the sunk cost trap when we're making these decisions?
Good question. The first, and maybe biggest step, is just awareness. Simply knowing that the sunk cost fallacy exists, understanding what it is, helps you spot it when it's influencing your thinking.
Just naming it helps.
It really does.
Ah.
Second, try to make decisions based on future costs and benefits, not past ones. Ask yourself, if I were starting from scratch today, knowing what I know now, would I still invest in this? If the answer is no, that's telling.
Okay, focus on the future, not the past investment.
Exactly. Set clear goals and criteria for success before you start, or at least have clear check-in points. Make decisions based on data and objective evidence as much as possible, rather than just gut feeling about past efforts.
Like using metrics.
Could be metrics. Or maybe a decision matrix, literally listing the pros and cons of continuing versus stopping based on current factors and weighing them objectively.
That sounds helpful. Take some emotion out of it.
It can. And finally, schedule regular reviews. Don't just let things drift. Set a cadence maybe every quarter or every 6 months to formally step back. Look at the progress, reassess the situation, and consciously decide if the strategy still makes sense.
Okay, so awareness, future focus, objective criteria, and regular reviews. That's really practical.
It's about trying to counteract that emotional pull of the past investments with some structured, forward-looking thinking.
Right. So bringing all these ideas together, if someone listening right now is facing one of these crossroads, what are some actionable steps or questions they can ask themselves?
Okay, good place to land. First, some self-awareness is really key. Think about your own patterns. Do you generally tend to maybe hang on too long? Or are you someone who tends to jump ship too quickly at the first sign of trouble?
Knowing your own bias.
Exactly. Reflecting on past experiences can be revealing. What actually happened the last time you pushed through something really hard? What happened when you decided to let something go? How did those decisions feel in hindsight?
Learn from your own history.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And pay attention to your tells, as you mentioned earlier.
Right, those little signals.
What are those feelings? Irritation, dread, boredom, resentment that consistently pop up when something isn't quite right for you. Learn to recognize and trust those signals.
Okay, what else?
Evaluate the actual opportunity cost. What are you not doing because you're sticking with this? But also, consider the potential upside of continuing. Is there a genuine chance to learn something important, to practice overcoming a specific challenge, to show up and build resilience even when it's uncomfortable?
So weigh the costs and the potential growth.
Yes. And get really clear on what's most important to you right now. Is your top priority honoring a commitment you made? Or is it more important in this season of your life to listen to your intuition telling you to change course? Neither is inherently right or wrong, but knowing your priority helps.
That's a tough balancing act sometimes.
It really can be, which is why talking it through is so valuable. Find someone you trust, someone who's relatively unbiased and doesn't have their own agenda tied up in your decision.
A neutral sounding board.
Exactly. Just explaining the situation out loud to someone else can bring so much clarity. And crucially, throughout this whole process, practice self-compassion.
Be kind to yourself.
Please. These aren't easy decisions. It's okay to feel confused or guilty or scared. Don't beat yourself up for struggling with it. Acknowledge the difficulty with kindness.
That's so important. And then, once you decide,
try your best to commit. Once you've weighed things up and made a call, try to move forward with it fully. Constantly second-guessing and flip-flopping can be really draining and counterproductive. Make the choice, and then focus your energy on making it work or moving on.
Okay, commit to the decision. Now, we've focused a lot on the nuances of knowing when to quit or change, but we should probably acknowledge the other side too, right? The sheer power of focus and just not stopping.
Absolutely. It's important to hold that perspective too. There's a strong argument to be made that the world heavily rewards exceptionalism, becoming truly the best at one thing. And that often requires unwavering, long-term, concentrated effort.
Like pick one thing and go all in.
Kind of. There's that idea of narrowing your focus down to one core idea, one major goal, and making that work, prioritizing it above almost everything else.
And acknowledging that great achievements usually demand serious sacrifice and discipline.
Exactly. It's often not about balance in those cases. It's about intense focus. That level of success often requires saying no to many other things and maintaining rigorous discipline over long periods.
There's that kind of intense motivational idea about meeting the person you could have been at the end of your life.
Right. That powerful visualization.
And the idea is that the daily choices, the micro decisions to push yourself, to stay focused, to not quit when it gets hard, those are the things that build that potential self. It's about trying to max out your potential through relentless effort in your chosen area.
It's a compelling vision for sure. That intense, detailed focus, that refusal to settle for average is often what separates truly remarkable achievements from the rest. So that perspective is definitely valid and powerful for some goals and some people.
So it really feels like, as we wrap this up, there's no single simple answer to the big question of quit or persist.
Definitely not. No magic formula, unfortunately.
Yeah. It really depends so much on the specific situation, doesn't it? Your reasons for starting, whether the goal still truly resonates with who you are now.
Whether you realistically have the resources, internal and external, to keep going effectively, what your own personal patterns and tendencies are.
And being really honest with yourself about things like the sunk cost fallacy, making sure you're deciding based on the future, not just the past.
Exactly. It boils down to a combination of deep self-reflection, maybe getting some unbiased outside perspective, looking at the facts on the ground, and yeah, having compassion for yourself during the process.
So maybe a final thought to leave everyone with. Perhaps the real wisdom isn't just in the ability to persevere, to have that grit we talked about. Maybe it's also about developing the clarity to recognize when a particular path, no matter how much you've invested in it, is no longer the right one for you.
And having the courage to choose differently.
Yeah, the courage to change direction. So, as you think about your own goals, the things you're pushing towards right now, which of these ideas we talked about really stands out? What feels like the most important question for you to consider for your next step?